Hello, this is Virtual the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. When I play the Vienna game with the white pieces, many opponents have the intuition that they shouldn't accept the gambit. But how does one decline the gambit? The best response is the somewhat unintuitive d5, which enters the Vienna game main line. d6, which looks suboptimal as it seemingly blocks in the dark square bishop, is suboptimal, but certainly not terrible. Practically all other intuitive looking responses to the Vienna Gambit are bad for black. Today we'll look at a game where the opponent declines the gambit with the sensible looking knight c6. Please enjoy! Alright, let's start off with the review, chess.com's algorithm, and as you can see, I ended up playing with very high accuracy in this game, over 93%. The opponent didn't do too badly, 82%, but as you can see, they made some errors at the beginning and I led sort of a commanding lead throughout the game. Let's have a look now at the analysis. So I played, of course, with the white pieces and e4, e5, knight c3, so the Vienna game. They played knight f6, which now allows for the Vienna Gambit, which is f4 in this position. So the gambit here is asking whether or not the opponent will capture the pawn on f4. And if they do that, that is bad for black. Now, at the sort of beginner intermediate level, it's not uncommon for people to accept the gambit, which then leads to a very nice game for white. However, for many people at this level, they do have the intuition maybe they shouldn't take the gambit. Maybe that's risky in some way. But of course, you now need to decline a gambit in one way. And as mentioned in the opening, there is only one good move, which is d5, immediately striking into the center. And that actually leads to the Vienna game main line. And that move is actually very slightly better for black, though it's largely equal. The other okay move is d6, but if white plays accurately, the advantage is still with white. Now, very commonly, people will decline the gambit, as in this game, with knight c6. And we will see why this is a problematic move. And you can see Stockfish already causes a +2 for white. So in this position, you can just straight up capture that pawn. Commonly, the opponent will, of course, capture the pawn back, which was sort of logic with playing knight c6 in the first place. But now we've got the devastating move d4, again threatening the knight. That knight can't take that knight because, of course, it's defended. And whether the opponent brings knight back to c6 or brings a knight to g6, as in this game, it neither is good. As you can see, they're still sort of in the +2 territory. The reason for that is I now have e5, again, now attacking the knight. So chasing their knights around with the pawn, and you will notice that for this knight, it has nowhere good to go. In fact, if you look at Stockfish's evaluation, the single best move for black now is in fact to undevelop that knight to g8. Now, in that case, white of course wins tempo, but they maintain the piece. And it's interesting that that is in fact the best move. Now, for opponents, however, who played knight c6 as a declination of the Vienna Gambit in the first place, they're probably going to not do that. Very commonly what they aim to do is to try to keep their pieces on the board. And here it is not uncommon then to see Queen e7 attempting to pin the pawn onto the king. And you can see it's an error on error. So that's +4 now, because I can now bring my queen to now block the pin, and this knight is still under attack. In this game, the opponent, again, frantically trying to keep their pieces on the board, made a mistake. So they played a knight f4, thinking that they're counter-attacking my queen. However, missing the fact that that square is in fact defended by my dark square bishop. So unfortunately, we are now at +10 by move 7, move 8. So completely winning, I'm completely winning in sort of the opening and entering into the mid game. And of course, this is still hanging. Opponent plays d6, but there's no reason I wouldn't capture that knight, which is what I do. Their queen, of course, then is pinned to their king, which now forces a queen trade. But, you know, when you're at +10, it doesn't really matter. More than happy to trade pieces. So they capture, and here I now have knight d5, which threatens the c6 pawn, or just entering the c7 pawn and just entering the c7 square, which allows me then to fork the king and the rook. Basically, this now forces the king to, either one of these squares. The king now must defend that square to get itself out of a potential fork, which means that the opponent now even loses their right to castle. So absolutely devastating, I think, here for black. Here I chose to give a check. King moves. I decide to capture the bishop. Now this actually isn't hanging, because if they capture the knight, then the bishop will then fork the king and rook, capturing the rook as well. So that was expected, and now I opted to capture that pawn. Now I am a little bit overextended here now. So the opponent does have some counterplay, but it's counterplay in the context, it's +10. So now it's a matter of sort of consolidating, defending. Here, just capture where possible, have to block. And here, I do have to, the opponent can make some aggressive moves. King is a little bit exposed in the center. But, they've got 2 rooks. I've got both rooks, and I still have the bishop. That was a good move by the opponent. And here, my thought was I really just needed to move the king out of that pin, which now allows me to move the knight. The opponent now sort of attacks, and here now I've got 2 basic moves here. I could go there or there. Because I was playing a little bit carelessly, because I thought I was completely winning, I'd sort of make a complete mistake here, straight up hanging that bishop. But you can see, even with that, I'm still +7. But that was a bit silly, wasn't it? Now it's a matter of doing some shuffling, bringing my rooks into the game now. And as you can see, it's not looking good for the opponent. Now with these pawns, basically it's like there's a force field, so that king can't come into the game. I move the king forward, so now giving an extra defense. The opponent's trying to push that pawn, but it doesn't really achieve very much. King sort of shuffling here a little bit, but attack the knight. Opponent pushes forward, but now king starts to infiltrate. So king, of course, towards the this is almost the end game, isn't it? But towards the sort of late middle end game is a powerful piece, because it can capture in all directions. Our opponent now forced to do the best move, which in fact is just trading their rook for my knight, which is perfectly okay for me. I'd finally bring my other rook into the game. Opponent does one move, and before going any further, actually opts to resign. So, I've still got the rook pair. They only have one rook. That king is stuck. I have more pawn. I have better pawns, because these pawns are split. Basically, it's a game for me just to convert to a win, but it shouldn't be difficult. And the opponent opts to resign, which is fine. So, good game. GG. The power of the Vienna Gambit for the player with the white pieces is that it is quite forcing in nature. There is only one good response by black, which is d5. At the beginner intermediate level, I've found that most of my opponents do not play this move. This means that as white, you've got a very high chance of being substantially ahead after the first few moves in the opening. Occasionally, as in this game, the opponent compounds error with error, resulting in a completely winning position when entering the middle game. I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching.